Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're really glad that you could join us for this really important event. My name is Eileen Travis, and I am the Executive Director of the New York City Bar Association's Lawyer Assistance Program. We provide free confidential help to lawyers, judges, law students, staff members, and family members who are affected by substance use and mental health problems. We are thrilled to have Nancy Espuche with us this evening. Nancy is a speaker, a mother, an author, and an advocate, sharing her experiences to audiences nationally. Her goal is to break the silence of a loved one's addiction and inspire those in charge to initiate strategies and open up the dialogue, a very important dialogue that we all should be having. She is the author of KardBoard House, My Life-Altering Journey Through Lucas's Addiction, which she wrote to give voice to Lucas and his struggle for recovery. She offers a personal view about the power of addiction, the complexity of the human condition, and the reminder that despite all the love, no one can short the course of another's life, no matter how hard they try. After Nancy speaks, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any comments or questions, I urge you to put them in the chat, and then we will open it up and answer your questions. So again, we're thrilled to have Nancy here. And Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you, Eileen, for the opportunity to share my story. Your support has provided a refuge and an outlet to address the impact of addiction on loved ones at other Bar Association events. But more importantly, each event has given me pause to dig deeper and reflect on my personal experience, the sorrow, the loss, and the love living with someone challenged by substance use. I hold gratitude in my heart. Some of you on this call might know me from my work within the legal community. Others may also be familiar with me through different channels. My heartfelt gratitude to you as well for participating and giving me the opportunity to share what I think is an important story for all. Addiction is complex. It is widely misunderstood. And even with all that we know, it remains an enigma of sorts. It creates havoc in every part of one's life. It destroys families, breaks people's hearts, and shatters the physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial well-being of the one suffering and their loved one. The domino effect is felt and witnessed in every aspect of life. One of my earliest memories of conscious awakening, digesting in real time that my son Lucas was in addiction's grip, was during a weekend visit his sophomore year of college. Clearly not the first or most challenging experience thus far, but my mind slowly, ever so slowly, needed to open and catch up to what my eyes and heart were saying. This takes courage, I kept thinking, and I felt anything but brave. As we got into Lucas's car, his eyes heavy and my antenna up, I watched, yes, in horror, Lucas's eyes continue to close and open and close and open again while behind the wheel. When we finally arrived at his apartment, Lucas proceeded to bed, where he spent the remainder of the day and most of the weekend unaware of my presence. I speak to you today from my heart on a subject that is both personal and critical. It brings shame, stigma, and does not discriminate. All prisoners are welcome. My beloved son Lucas fought a long, arduous battle whose life succumbed to the giant beast we call addiction. The chapters of our story are bewildering and wrenching. My beautiful boy was being eaten alive from something way bigger and stronger than my profound love for him. And right before my eyes, we both started our paths of decline. The shame overwhelming, the stigma haunting, and the guilt shadowing my thoughts and actions. How do I reveal this unbearable truth to my family, friends, and employer? Will I be ridiculed and blamed? And the bigger question, how do I step towards life when my son could be headed towards death? I take a pause here and want to highlight emphatically that many are in recovery and on the road to recovery and are thriving. Although Lucas did not, please hold tight to those possibilities. They are real. We know that addiction impacts many and the costs are great. This past week, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration released the 2020 National Survey on Drug Use and Health. The figures are staggering, with over 40 million people, or 14.5% of people ages 12 and older, struggling with a substance use disorder. The CDC 2020 data indicates that overdose deaths were up to 93,331 people, with more than 20,000 deaths above the previous year. I cannot help but ask myself over and over again, what is it the human species is craving? This crisis is now in front of all of us. Our family members, loved ones, colleagues, neighbors, community members, and political figures do not escape this scourge. The challenge is running rampant throughout our lives, organizations, businesses, and educational facilities. What are we to do? With the staggering numbers and recent reporting on mental health and addiction within the legal community, there is another figure impacting your industry. A percentage of the legal workforce is struggling with a loved one's substance use, people who sit amongst you who are silently struggling. The rippling effect is not theirs to bear alone. The silence is impacting more than their daily lives. It is draining life out of your business as well. Job disintegration is added to the list. Those impacted struggle to bring their best. They struggle too with how much to reveal to their leaders, uncertain of finding a safe environment where guidance and support are offered. This problem is now your problem too. I have worked among colleagues who have lived through trauma and tragedy, a critically ill child or parent, an emotionally or handicapped sibling, the death of a partner or spouse, a frightening diagnosis. What I remember is the quiet demand to pull it together, to continue with work with the same fever and charges before, to block or erase what is impossible to block or erase morning, noon, and night. This burden is hovering over some of your strongest employees and colleagues today. And with the current COVID pandemic and its related workplace changes, many, if not all, have yet to reveal their circumstance, that they and their loved ones are in danger. To deny this deafening sound wave dismisses the interwoven connection within the corporate structure. How that shows up in the workplace can vary, but this is certain. Performance, accessibility, participation, teamwork, reliability, interest is erased, minimized, or inconsistent. Businesses are exposed to lost productivity and employee instability. Managers are confronted with absenteeism, missed deadlines, and more occupational hazards. Tempers flare, accountability reduced, and being present is a memory. Tomorrow, this could be you. I recall when work became an interference. Engaged in a fight to save Lucas's life, I spent every day searching, running, hiding, fearing. The strain, stress, and toll superseded my cognitive thought, and who I once was at work no longer existed. I loved my work, creating and building long-term professional relationships. My boss of 32 years loved it too, until my struggle interfered with my performance and results. I often wonder how different it might have been if the tools, education, and compassion were available in my workplace. They weren't. How can I deliver what is deserved and expected at work? I continually ask myself. I am grateful and lucky that I subsequently had and currently have a different experience. Compassion that gives way to an openness where all needs are acknowledged. A wisdom and generosity that breed loyalty, hard work, and dedication. What is given is returned. You can do that too. The evidence is clear. Family members and loved ones are challenged by the extensive emotional, professional, physical, financial, psychological, chain reaction. Loved ones are now in crisis too. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, says Viktor Frankl. And so began my journey. A bit about Lucas. Sorry. Lucas was born on February 18th, 1991. Shortly after his birth, he began to show signs of a stomach ailment, which continued with greater frequency and were longer in duration. After many battles of an undiagnosed stomach ailment, Lucas was diagnosed with severe bouts of pancreatitis around the age of 3. After multiple hospital stays and many tests, an endoscopy concluded that Luke had a cyst in his common bile duct between his gallbladder and liver, known as a colorectal seal, and immediate surgery was scheduled. The following day, a 7-hour operation was performed, cyst and gallbladder removed. Lucas was home in 5 days versus what was originally thought would be a 2-week hospital stay. His very wise surgeon prepared us. Lucas's dad and I needed to enroll Lucas in early childhood counseling to address what were the projected difficulties to come, including trust of self, trust of others, and trust of authority. To note, each hospitalization and many of the given tests required opioids and barbiturate medications. Was this a precursor to Lucas's substance use? I wonder. Lucas continued to suffer other medical trauma, a panda diagnosis, tonsillectomy, and 3 concussions. Despite it all, Lucas excelled scholastically, athletically, creatively, physically, but his insides and his outsides were not aligned. Lucas started smoking marijuana around 10th grade. Around the same time, his competitive and assertive nature continued to grow, and his relationship with himself and others, including me, became more challenging. That drug use accelerated, and in 11th grade, Lucas was hospitalized with 4 different substances in his body. In the 2nd month of his junior year of college, I arranged an intervention. Something clicked. Lucas was in serious trouble. So was I. He attended 4 treatment facilities over the course of 5 to 6 years. An exceptional young man who had it all, except himself. On December 19th, 2016, Lucas passed away from a heroin and Xanax combination. He was 25 years old. After years of participating in family groups, living with prayer and hope, my purpose had disappeared. I was now faced with my version of the human condition, how to confront, face, address, respond to what is given to us. I, like you, continue to weave my way through to my authentic self. I cannot say that I always feel authentic when speaking about addiction to loved ones, family members, or anyone sharing my story. Sometimes it is easier to help another than it is to help myself. And sometimes it is easier to follow instruction than to listen to that voice inside my head. I wrote KardBoard House as a bridge to connect my past and my present, and more so, to give voice to Lucas, as seen through some of our letters to one another in the book, to share what I hope will offer your loved one, friend, stranger, coworker, business or community leader, teacher, what my experience revealed, what I believe to be true, and what is required to step towards the light every day. Lucas's and my travels, individually and collectively, taught me life's greatest and hardest lessons. Ones that are exemplified in Lucas's battle, that human suffering belongs to all of us, that the power of addiction, the accompanying struggles, and the fight and determination needed for personal recovery take bravery and strength. They open the door to deeper self-knowledge and a profound quest for wisdom. They displayed that knowledge alone could not erase my powerlessness over Lucas's substance use, and taught me too that self-care, acceptance, separation, and boundaries, and most importantly, love, are the critical components of human survival. These lessons that continue to teach me every day have shaped who I am, leading me here to share my story and what I've gained and learned through my loss and the choice, yes, the choice to march ahead. What I did know and was challenged facing during Lucas's earlier years of addiction was that people do die from substance use disorder and that this could kill us both. I understood that I was loving Lucas to the point of recklessness, thinking I had the power to change him and the eventual outcome. I was aware that his actions, not words, were the indicator of where Lucas was in his recovery and that we both had mountains of work to do. I knew too that loving Lucas was not enough. I needed to love me a bit more. We could not return to the way we were before. I am going to share a letter, one of Lucas's letters that's in the book. As I mentioned earlier, the book is comprised of a lot of Lucas's and my writings. He was a prolific writer, and over the course of many years, I compiled a list of hundreds and hundreds of emails between us. But this one shows, again, the complexity of addiction, his lucidity at the time, his hope, his wish for recovery. Oh, where'd it go? Dated July 22nd, 2013. He was in treatment, his second treatment facility then. Dear Mom, I've just completed a treatment assignment on my understanding of the program's clinical philosophy. I'm learning about the way I've coped with events in my life, stress and emotions, how they supported my use, and the way you've responded to me. I've learned that if together we can change a few things and begin to cope with anxiety differently, I'll be less likely to relapse. I'm going to share more specifically what I am discovering. From a young age, I have found comfort in making others responsible for my problems and the emotions that came up for me. I had expectations that you would handle uncomfortable situations. I wanted you to handle my feelings around my surgery and the emotions I felt about being sick. I wanted you to cheer me up and make arrangements for me to have fun when kids wouldn't accept me. These events planted the idea in my head that I would always have someone to pull me out of the quicksand that I jumped into. These patterns progressed as I got older, and I, and I found more ways to go around my emotions. I used the same behaviors which were linked to my fear and insecurities to get what I wanted, not what I needed. I then began to use drugs to run from all my feelings. I would blame situations and other people to justify medicating myself. I used drugs throughout the divorce, Jacob's death, and on countless other occasions. I am working on taking ownership for my life experiences. Related to how I was at a young age, I continue to find the motives for my actions elsewhere instead of looking internally. Throughout my life, you have done your best to comfort and provide for me. I've taken advantage, manipulating you through the years, and I believe that has had an effect on your natural parenting instincts. Getting you to pay for my DWI lawyer, convincing you to send me to London for that program after overdosing, and getting you to repair my car after I totaled it are all examples of how I took advantage of a situation to get my way. Lessons I should have learned. I never did. And it's my fault. More forward, I think we can have a healthier relationship if I face similar problems on my own. I ask that we put boundaries in place that will hopefully aid in my recovery. I ask that if I get into trouble with the law or relapse, you do not assist with the solution or payment for another treatment. I ask that if I want to return to New York, you let me figure out how. And I ask that you pay more attention to my actions than to my words. They will be the better indicator of who I am and what I'm truly focused on. Here in treatment, I'm working on how to better handle my emotions, subjecting myself to feedback from others and locating my triggers, the behaviors that may affect my sobriety. It is important that I continue to work on my character with a short-term plan to continue the 12 steps of AA with my sponsor, attend meetings, and continue to work with my counselor to figure out what is in my best interests once I complete the program. In the long run, I plan to offer my hand to those who still suffer. I would like to eventually sponsor others as well. I plan to create a fixed payment plan for my debt, which I owe, reestablish Grapefruit Goods, a company that he started, and head back to the real estate industry. I understand this is a rare opportunity to start again and to rebuild my foundation. It is my hope that you will continue using Freedom Institute and Naranon as resources for yourself. I'm glad you now have more time to give your life the focus and attention it surely deserves. Love, Lucas. What is most discernible as I confront life without Lucas are the gifts of the human spirit. That life like addiction is complicated, and that it isn't what happens to us, but how we internalize what happens to us that is unique and personal, as Dr. Gabor Mate so wisely says. And more, quoting Dr. Mate, is understanding that addiction is not the problem, but the solution to pain and trauma. The human spirit knows the critical importance of personal empowerment and a sense of worthiness. The data has shown that the lack of those related feelings contribute to many addictions. Saving myself became my new mantra. There was no substitute for getting educated, finding support, participating, and listening to those who have walked this path. Embracing and becoming friends with my powerlessness was crucial, as was empowering Lucas while releasing any attempt to fix him. No easy task, but I was committed to listen, to validate Lucas's thoughts and feelings without judgment and or direction, as well as my own, to encourage us both with compassion while remaining true to my values as a parent and an individual. And most importantly, to let Lucas know the depths of my love. My journey has brought to light that living life is a choice and that it does take a village. We are here to honor, bolster, and care for ourselves and others. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to do so. I encourage you to take steps, no matter how small, to live your best life every minute of every day, and to help others to do the same, to educate, advocate, and listen, to help rebuild and empower those so they may once again make productive contributions to their life, community, and workplace. And to those living with the unthinkable, a loved one's substance use, forgive yourself. Forgive your loved one. Lucas did not choose this, nor did your child, parent, sibling, partner, friend. Sadness and pain are not always visible, so pay attention to what is truly being said or silently shown. As nothing goes in a straight line, hold on to hope. Trust yourself and your intuition. And remember, there is no substitute for love. Be bold, be brave, be you. And I'm going to close reading an article that I was asked to write last month in Treatment Magazine about hope. The gift of hope. What is hope? Where is it stored? If lost, does it ever return? Throughout the valiant attempts my son Lucas made to recover from opioid addiction, I found hope, lost it, and found it again. It did not show up the moment it was pleaded for, nor did its presence go in a straight line. Lucas lost his battle with substance use on December 19, 2016. With each fall came hope's disappearance. With each rise, hope reappeared, sometimes in waves, sometimes in small doses, and sometimes in plentiful abundance. Perhaps hope is a container where belief and faith are kept, a place where one can visit when needed, a trusting that life, its consequences, and its randomness eventually, or hopefully, convert to meaning. That is where I found it. My story is your story, ones that are filled with planning, anticipating, and hope. Hope that our lives will proceed as we envision them. Hope that an incident, longstanding challenge, or loss will not enter our tale. Perhaps hope lies under the healing of choice. For me, choosing was a daily quest. How do I continue in the face of Lucas's passing? Do I believe, as I often professed, in the essence and strength of the human spirit? Do I trust that life, my life, has meaning and purpose? Somewhere deep in my being, I came to the place where the answers to those questions were a yes. A straight line, no. An easy task, not close. But a will to forge ahead, knowing that Lucas wished that for me. I hope that for me too. Since Lucas's passing, I've asked myself over and over and over again, what have I gained and what could I offer for my profound sorrow? Hope is my answer. It allows for the mystical signs to be seen, the voice of Lucas to be heard, and the love of others to be felt. Hope is a gift of the heart. So thank you all for letting me share my story and my hope for all of you. And if you would be interested in KardBoard House, you see it behind me. It can be purchased on Amazon. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Eileen.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing that unbelievable story of your experience and your experience with your son. I think you've definitely given a lot of hope to people who are listening out there, certainly to me, in knowing that there are possibilities, and and how powerful, a reminder of how powerful addiction is, and how sometimes we lose that fight, no matter how much love, how much attention, how much knowledge we have, that sometimes it's bigger than we are.
Yeah.
So important to remember that. So very important. So I urge anyone who has a question or a comment to put it in the chat. But while we're waiting for that, I do have some questions. Oh, wait a minute. We do have a question. Thank you so much, Nancy. Did the treatment center that Lucas was, okay, wait, let me find it. Okay. Did the treatment center that Lucas was in refer you to a support group?
Actually, Lucas was in 4 treatment facilities throughout the country. I actually found one of them through the support group in New York City. That I went to a place called the Freedom Institute. It was for parents whose children were struggling with substance use. It was before Lucas's trip to treatment. They referred a treatment facility. No, all the others really referred Narnon. And places like Hazleton Betty Ford, which was Lucas's 3rd treatment facility out here in the Twin Cities, where I now reside. And the reason why I came out here was because Luke was here. They have monthly meetings. Some places have weekly meetings, but you need to be in the vicinity. They're not visual, they were live. So I used to go to Hazleton regularly to those parent meetings, family meetings. Hope that answered your question, but I'm happy to talk to you if you, at any point in time, I can offer you more information.
Oh, to follow up on that question, in the 4 programs that he was in, were there family programs attached to that? Did they offer programs for families?
3 of the 4 did. The 4th one did not. 3 of the 4 did. I spent anywhere from 3 to 4 days doing a family program in North Carolina, Florida, Minnesota, and individual therapy sessions with the counselors and with Lucas, and then groups as well during those times.
So as you said before, even though I'm assuming that Lucas was given an aftercare plan after he came home from those programs, but you were not given an aftercare plan as a family
That's
member.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. Let's see.
And I think I do want to say, Eileen, that if you walked into any parents' meeting of children who have been in treatment, I think it's the biggest concern for families. Where do we go here? And we were all very grateful for the NARNAR meetings we participated in throughout the country, because that's where we got a lot of our information and a lot of our education and a lot of our support. None of them followed up with me after treatment. Not one, to see how I was or how Luke was.
Pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. I mean, I've heard wonderful stories from families about Naranon and how supportive it is. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, so if your employer had demonstrated compassion and patience, would you have been more productive and better able to balance your work and the challenges with Lucas?
I would like to say that I definitely would have been more productive. The balancing act was challenging because things came at the most opportune times, and I often didn't know what I was going to be hit with, at any point in time, whether it was a hospital visit in the middle of the night or something of that nature. But I think with understanding, always for me came a desire to be productive and to do the work that I was hired to do and to support the organization that I was hired to support. So yeah, I believe that was that I would definitely have been more productive, and certainly would have found a way, if things got out of tilt, out of kilter a bit, that I would have found a way to balance it back the other way. What was my experience?
There is a follow-up question. Did your employer offer any support options to you?
Nothing. Nothing. None of them. And my recent job, which is wonderful, I must say. I mean, I'm very new there, and they understand clearly where I am, and very compassionate. All of them, every one of them, have been very. But no, that has not been put into action. One of the reasons why I did speak at the Employees Assistance Professional Association International Conference years ago, my push was really to bring in resources, myself, people, anybody to talk to start identifying how they could help employees like myself who were struggling terribly. Was my experience with Al-Anon. I did not attend Al-Anon. It was Nar-Anon, which is Narcotics Anonymous, but I went to the family program, the meetings, not for those struggling with substance use disorder and drug addiction, but for the family members. I don't know if perhaps the difference, you want to share the difference, or Eileen, Al-Anon.
Well, I think, we were talking a little bit about this before the program started, and I mentioned that during the pandemic, thanks to one of our committee members, we started an NA group for lawyers, a Narcotics Anonymous. We've had an AA group for lawyers for many, many years, but not every person fits that mold, even though the people who facilitate the AA group have been very open to people coming in. But, there's a difference between being an alcoholic and being addicted to opioids or, to heroin, to drugs. And, and it's very, very important. So it's the same thing with Al-Anon is really geared more towards families of alcoholics, where Nar-Anon is really of people who are using substances. So it is important to make that distinction.
Oh,
You see the next one?
well, addiction, it's just long. Thank you. Oh, one of Lucas is a lawyer, a wonderful, remarkable man. Well, I'm going to read it because he was Lucas's soccer coach and did everything to help Lucas. When Lucas played travel soccer, he was quite an athlete. As Nancy said, addiction does not discriminate. Her honor to coach he honored to coach Lucas in soccer for 10 years. He was an incredible athlete. Lucas was an incredible athlete and a great young man. He also graduated with his older son and was friends with his younger son, who is now in recovery. I'm an attorney, and if not for support from Al-Anon, I might have lost my practice while my son was in rehab. I thank Nancy for her friendship and for her courage to write this book and to make these presentations. Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
There was
Perfect.
one before that. Let's see.
Somebody had read my book. In terms of treatment facilities, you mentioned one briefly in your book that was a tough love approach that you didn't think was right for Lucas. Were you able to do anything to change the treatment center's approach? Not when Lucas was there, no. You know, who Lucas was and and his personality. And that's really what I really want to highlight. And I think it's what KardBoard House has really imprinted on my own heart. Nobody is a mirror copy of another, and their addiction reasons, genetics, life experiences are not a duplicate of anyone else's. And the challenge that I found when Lucas was in early treatment was that a lot of people would clump together, and Lucas had his own personal, particularly medical challenges as a youngster, which are now very much talked about as severe trauma, which is a real precursor to addiction. And I did not know that then, but I do now. And the treatment facilities often, or I'd say 95% of the time, did not really focus on that. And I used to always say, I think it's really urgent that you get Lucas to talk about what happened to him, just to show or highlight how profoundly deep that was. A scar for Lucas. He had a scar across his stomach. It was about 8 inches. It happened when he was shy of his 4th birthday. So from the time after that, Lucas was committed to growing a 6-pack because he wanted desperately nobody to notice his scar. And after he passed, and his camp friends did a memorial for him, we were talking, and one of them said something about, I said something about Lucas's scar. And one of the camp friends said, oh yes, Lucas told us when we asked him what happened to him, that he accidentally fell on a knife. He could not even admit that he had surgery. He felt different. He felt like there was something wrong with his body. Something was wrong with him. Why was he born struggling in pain for so many years, for the first 4 years of his life? And I really urged the treatment facilities to address that. It's true that Lucas has a shield of armor, and it was very difficult to break through that. But to get back to your question, the answer is no. They were believers that if he wasn't paying attention or listening, that you should withhold your love. And it didn't go over well for me. I was often at odds with his counselors, and it's the one treatment where I think he really walked out with nothing gained, very little gained, and a lot more rage. I hope that answered your question. I don't know what they do now. I don't think the tough love approach really sells anymore. I think people have learned a lot since Lucas was in treatment. You know, we're going back 12 years, 11 years. A lot has people have really understood that love is so critical and that you do not want to disengage with your loved one.
You know, just to piggyback on that, one of the things that's changed dramatically are interventions. I mean, when interventions started, they used the Johnson model, and the Johnson model was the surprise model. So people involved in the intervention met, and then the person who was being intervened on was brought in and completely surprised by what was going on. And I think very often felt so betrayed by the people who were involved that they didn't come to that and speak to them directly or let them know what was happening. And they were so angry with what happened that very often, even if they would go to treatment failed because they were so angry, they couldn't really focus on the treatment. And that's changed dramatically over the years. And now it's the family systems model where the person is really told from the very beginning that there's going to be this meeting, you're invited to come. You know, people have important things to talk to you about. And it's very inclusive and very invitational to really open up those channels of conversation. So things have changed over time. Yes. With recognition that that everybody needs to be included and educated, as you said. And there needs to be a lot more about that. So I'm curious as to how you found Gabor Mate and what you've learned from his really important work.
So the University of Minnesota has a neuroscience department run by Dr. Mark Thomas, a remarkable man who's studying the brain and opioid addiction. And I've done a couple of, so when Lucas passed away, people asked where they could give money. And I encouraged them to give money to the University of Minnesota Center for Neuroscience and Addiction, because they're doing wonderful work on understanding what happens to all of us. And the brain changes are pretty dramatic and very extensive, and they happen pretty quickly. So because of that, they invited me to come in and meet with that department, and then invited me to hear Dr. Gabor Mate speak. And he wrote a book called years ago called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost, which for anybody who's interested in really understanding the work that he does, he's a Hungarian. He was born in Hungary. I think he was a year or 2 years old when the Nazis came in and rounded up his family, and his mother handed him over to somebody and said, take care of my son. I could be not giving you all the facts correctly, but it sort of goes like this. And anyway, his mother, I believe, was the only one who came back, and Gabor Mate went on to study medicine, really believes in epigenetics and that everything is stored on a cellular level from generation to generation to generation, and that we are all products of what came before us and came before them and came before them. And he started to study addiction, and he believes in safe houses and runs them out of Vancouver. He must be close to 80 now. And when he went on a break, when there was a lunch break during the talk that I went to see him at, I walked up on stage and asked him if he felt that Lucas's medical intervention was the trauma that he talks about, because Dr. Mate believes that addiction is really very trauma-based, and trauma meaning anything to whomever trauma happens to, or how they internalize what happens to them, as said earlier. And he thought Lucas's medical intervention was a big challenge for Lucas, tremendous. For those who have read my book, he wrote me a letter. We've been in touch, and there is a beautiful letter from him towards the end of my book, talking exactly about this. But I ended up really reading his work, and it's a very different perspective. It encompasses a lot of personal experience, let alone highlighting genetics. I don't know I can't tell you that nobody in my family had drinking problems, didn't have drinking problems. I think my grandfather might have been a closet alcoholic, but I don't know. I never saw him drink or get, wild. I don't know about that, but he really talks about trauma and what is so critical to the soul of a human being. And I love that work. and I use it. I think he's very wise, and it's taught a lot of us a lot about addiction.
I agree with that. In the book, you mentioned that there's a difference between acquiring knowledge on substance use and developing wisdom on the subject. Can you expand on that?
I think wisdom is your intuition. And I think if we all learn to listen to that gut, I don't know how many times we get that feeling in our stomach and we know what we're being told, turn left, don't turn right, you know, sit tight, whatever. Don't pick up the phone and call that, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, at first I really needed to acquire knowledge. Addiction was a complete unknown to me. I mean, I knew people who did drugs. I was raised in the 70s, you know, I wasn't oblivious, certainly, but I had never seen anybody struggling with substance use. And I had to acquire a lot of factual knowledge. I had to learn what that meant, and I did. And I had to learn what it meant to relapse and what treatment facilities were all about. And I started to speak to people. But when it really came to helping Lucas and helping myself, it wasn't about those facts, and it wasn't about all those details. It was really about a knowing and what I gathered and sort of formulated in my own gut, and how I played it out for myself and with people who I really respected and admired, who really were there to help and me sort this all out. But I think wisdom's really about intuition, a different kind of knowing, a different kind of knowing. I mean, how many people look at their children? I can't tell you. I would be with friends and I'd go, Lucas is very high right now. And they would go, what are you talking about? He's not high. As a matter of fact, I was in therapy with Lucas in his last treatment facility. And I said to the therapist, do you know that Lucas is high right now? And she said, no, he's not. I said, oh, yes, he is. And like, sometimes I knew. I knew. And yeah. But you know what? You know, when we all become introspective and take a look, we know when we're kidding ourselves too. We do. We all know when we're not being authentic or real or telling ourselves the truth. And I needed to really learn how to tell myself the truth with Lucas's addiction.
Is there anything you would do differently today that you believe would be helpful to others sharing experience with a loved one today?
Yes. It's a terrible regret that because there are so many woulda, shoulda, couldas. In retrospect, hindsight, I would say that I succeeded often in giving Lucas a lot of attention and a lot of patience and a lot of love. And there were times when it was so difficult. It's tough. I say it in the book, it's tough loving somebody struggling with addiction. The lying, the cheating, the stealing, things going missing, money going. I thought I had another $20, $30 in my pocketbook last night. Did I buy food? Did I do some? It were times, but had I known then what I know now, I would have been able to say, it's his brain. It's not him. It's not him. He's unable. He's not capable, and I would have directed myself differently. And I do believe this, and I know it's horrible when you're being lied to, cheated on, and all of the above. I think love is the only thing that people struggling with addiction hear anyway. You could be talking up a storm or screaming at the top of your lungs, or, throwing their laundry out of your washing machine and telling them to get out of the house. It's blah, blah, blah. It doesn't, and they probably don't even hear the other, but I think they can feel the other. And I think, look, I've had enough shame because I've heard, oh, I wonder what happened in that household. Oh, what kind of mother was she? Blah, 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 too. And how hard that is. And I know how hard it was for Lucas to be who he was and the stigma that came along with it. And I'm sorry that I ever added to that. And I know at times I must have.
So, stigma is a huge issue that we deal with all the time, especially in the legal profession. It's been for a very long time the number one obstacle that's prevented legal professionals, starting in law school, from getting help, from admitting they have a problem, fear for law students that they won't be admitted to practice if character and fitness finds out, which of course is not true, but there is this perception. With lawyers, they're going to lose their jobs or their reputations. Stigma is a huge part of it. Is that something, obviously, that you saw too in your own son?
Terrible.
Yeah.
I think it definitely contributed to Lucas's inability to face what had happened to him, because he excelled at everything. He was a superstar athlete. He played for the Jewish Olympics in basketball. He was, all county soccer. He played on travel soccer teams, basketball, high school soccer, basketball, tennis. He was smart as can be. He was charming. He was funny. He was engaging. He was beautiful. But when he couldn't fight this demon, this monster, he would call me in the middle of the night going, who am I? What happened to me? How do I look at people who once knew me? He was so shamed and so unable to really dive into the help that he was offered. A very wise man in New York, a therapist, said to me, who knew Lucas, he said, Nancy, he just couldn't turn the button off. He just couldn't turn the button off because he really had to look, and it was too hard for him.
Okay. Excuse me. When others approach you or learn that Lucas lost his life in an opioid overdose, what would you want them to say to you? And what do you think others in a similar position want to hear?
I want them to ask me about Lucas. I want them to mention his name. I want people to help keep him alive through talking about him. And I know people really shy away. People don't know what to say. They think if they say something, they're going to upset you. They're scared of what your reaction would be. I encourage everybody who knows somebody who lost a child or a loved one to ask them how they're doing today. And do you want to talk about Lucas? Or is there anything you want to share about Lucas? I think that's what everybody wants. And I think that that's often what we don't get. You would be surprised how many people go away when you lose a loved one to addiction. And this is not about blaming or accusing people of being mean but it happens. I'm not the only one who lost a child. I know many, sadly, who did to this epidemic. And we all say the same thing. Where'd people go? Where'd people go? And I appreciate that it's hard for people. It was hard for me when other people lost their child. But I say with great bold letters, show up. It's really important. People really need you. And we really need you. And we want you to talk about our loved one. People think the first year comes, life goes on. Life does go on if you choose to have life go on, but people go, oh, are you healed? No, I'm not healed. I'll never be healed. I'll never have my son again. But I'm working towards trying to be part of the living again. And part of that is talking about Lucas. He was the most important part of my life and my greatest love. So.
Are there any other questions that people have or any comments that you want to make? Nancy, anything you wanted to share as if you haven't shared enough of yourself?
No, just have hope. Have hope. Find joy. That's what Lucas used to say to me all the time. Mom, I want you to have joy. I want you to find joy. We all deserve it. We do. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I really am honored and deeply appreciative of your time. And Eileen, I'll follow up with you soon. Thank you. Really, just thank you.
Well, we were talking before about, how everything happens for a reason. And, you came into my life several years ago for a reason. And it's just been such a pleasure. I'm so grateful to know you and, for you to have this opportunity to share. So thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming.